Welcome to the Zesty Ginger Podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex. We are here for transformation. Yours, ours, and the collective. Personal and professional for practitioners. But not just any transformation. Compassionate transformation. Because between the two of us, we have seemed to have done things the painful way. Let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We aren't afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul. Combining 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to the best life possible in a compassionate way. Compassion, yes, yet plan to roll up your sleeves. Transformation requires your participation. And a quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, Dr. Alex here with you. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here on the podcast, and I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you today. We're going to talk about something incredibly important today, and this is a phenomenon, a state that Megan and I called the spiral of suffering. And specifically today, we're going to start by talking about the health spiral of suffering. So as the name implies, you can end up in the spiral of suffering in many categories of life. And here's the deal, is that once we end up in the spiral of suffering in one area, it often then bleeds into and impacts other areas. So what usually ends up happening is that there are many ways to end up in the spiral of suffering. And your in on that will be in often one important area of life. And for many of you who are listening, this is health. And it was kind of like, well, life was going okay, or it was going great, or maybe it wasn't even going that great. And then something happens, and all of a sudden, the health can't be denied anymore. It's a problem, it's a big problem, and now here we are. And then the things that we do actually, the ways that we think, feel, and therefore behave, then continue to create what then becomes a spiral, right? The concept of a spiral is that one event and one action leads to another, which comes to another one, which comes full circle-ish back to where you started, making that worse, and up or down the spiral you go. And in this one, it is obviously distinctly down, right? This is the suffering capacity. This is the emotional component of pain is suffering. And so because there are so many ways to end up here, and it is then a way of being, a way of living, and a way of thinking and feeling that then becomes somebody's state. Now, this is not who somebody is at their core level, but you can embody the identity of living in the spiral of suffering, and we can get there in several important ways. And in this episode, I'm going to break all of that down for you. And we're going to even talk about, right, how do you know? How do you know that it's you? How do you know it's your client? If you see clients that are having this kind of thinking and experience and all of that. So whether you are dealing with it yourself or you teach and coach in any capacity, then more than likely you are working with people who are living this. And maybe even when we're coaches and things like that, sometimes we are still in it, and sometimes we are still in it in certain areas of life. And we're going to break all of that down today. Before I dig further into it, I wanted to do a little shout out because this episode is actually supported by our friends at FullScript. Now, FullScript, if you haven't heard us talk about this before, is an online formulary that allows practitioners to compile and curate supplements at a discounted rate. This is where we, along with all of our friends and loved ones, get all of our high quality and effective supplements and the supplement options. And this is also happening with keeping budgeting in mind, which is so key when we are making practical decisions for ourselves. So by visiting our collection, you can see what we use and have benefited from throughout our health and transformation journeys, and be able to see different categories where we have put those collections in. While the physical body is far from the end-all be-all of healing and transformation and living a life that you love, of course we talk about that a lot here, we can't deny that having a toolkit full of physical body resources is a key to feeling safe and supported in the body, right? It all works together, and that is why we love avenues like this, where Fullscript really allows people to curate collections and do it in a budget-friendly manner, and that is a huge, huge deal. And thank goodness that there are so many options for each of us. So if you go check out our collections, you can do that by going to zestyginger.com/fullscript, and you will get an automatic 15% off anything that you see there in the formulary. Once you check that out, feel free to pop in to our inbox with questions if you have anything that comes up along the way. But generally speaking, we have grouped all of that stuff that we love to try to make it as easy and as straightforward as possible. So that's zestyginger.com/fullscript. Okay, so let's get back to the spiral of suffering, and specifically the health spiral of suffering. So how does one even know that they are in it? And let's zoom in on health, though we'll be having lots more conversations about this in the future, because there's lots to discuss about the spiral of suffering and how to end up there and how to maintain being there and all of that. But the way that you will often know that you or a coaching client or someone that you're working with is having this is that they will say, I do all of this stuff and I'm so miserable and I still don't get the results. Okay, so let's break that down. When someone says, I do all the things, that really is saying, I am viewing this thing that's happening in my life, this experience that I'm having, as working hard. This is something that feels like a challenge and is difficult and requires energy expenditure, and that costs them something, right? In saying, I do all this stuff, it implies a lot about what they think, because it's not, I do some of this stuff. Right? That is, yeah, I do good stuff. When someone says all, usually what they're talking about is that they are doing all the things that they know how to do or what to do. That is never actually true. Megan and I have been at this for a really long time in the grand scheme of things, and we still haven't tried everything, right? So it's actually not true at all, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying, I'm not talking about everything available. I'm saying everything that I know, which could be very limited, to be honest. I'm doing it all, right? And that interpretation of I'm doing all that I can, then, just knowing humans, what does that lead to? If you're doing all you can and not getting results, then of course frustration is a very appropriate response to that, right? So do all the stuff, plus minus on whether that's true, usually no. 99.9 no, and I'm so miserable. So then that's tacking on, they're doing something that they perceive as good, or you perceive as good, and the experience is miserable. So I'm doing the FODMAP diet, I'm doing the elimination diet, I'm going low carb, I am taking 37 supplements, I am forcing myself to not go out to eat and go to bed early, and therefore I have no connection in my life, right? I'm doing all these things that cost me something, and I have feelings about that, is the subtext. And the takeaway from that combination and the flurry of feelings someone would have which is of course unique to each situation, is then they're saying, I'm so miserable, right? I'm unhappy. I don't like this. My life is not my own. I don't feel connected. I feel different from everybody. I feel lonely when in my sickness and everybody else is healthy, right? There's subtext underneath there too. I do all the things and I'm miserable. So I'm doing a lot and I hate it. And I still don't get the results. And so that's the conclusion of those things. And there's the things to do and the cost of it, the current experience, which is miserable, and the continuation of something unwanted while something that is wanted continues to move away from them or from you. Of course, then, from these things is where all of the negative emotions, the frustrations, the guilt and shame, the giving up, the nothing ever works for me, the why would I even invest in this because it's just another thing that's going to fail. All of that then is a smooth extension of everything that we just said in that sentence, right? Because once you state that, the only way that you could be congruent and feel after that is bad. Because why would you do a bunch of work, not like the process, and not like where it's going? That is never going to yield. You're not going to wake up one day being like, I feel great, I'm so high vibe, look at my positive emotions, right? That is the wrong narrative to have those emotions be attached to it. And in fact, most people would say like it's not very practical to expect yourself to live this narrative and believe it and then experience a completely different emotional state as a result of it. Really, the appropriate response to this statement is a negative interpretation and therefore negative feeling emotions in it, right? Now, could someone get to discongruent state? Yes, but I would argue that most people are not there. Most people are actually congruent. They think the thing and they feel correspondingly, right? And so on any given day, if you're like, gosh, I'm down, I'm sad, it's important to notice that that is the emotions do match up. And that is actually less gaslighty and crazy making to really think, well, I'm actually congruent with myself, even if it's not where I want to be, often feels better than I am gaslighting and lying to myself and I'm not even congruent within myself, right? I'm not happy and I'm pretending that I am. So that is that kind of statement, if you are a coach, that is something I would kind of commit to being a bit of a red flag. Kind of when people say stuff like, nothing ever works for me, or I always mess it up. Those level blanket statements, we always start to get our ears on. And even if you're not a practitioner, you're listening, these are the mental gremlins that you will hear in yourself. And it's important to flag them because once we begin to identify it and not sweep it under the rug, then at that point we can get out of the spiral of suffering. So you can kind of see how the spiral is represented within that statement. It's a lot of commotion and a lot of negative experiences to process, heal from, and do mindset work around, but it's actually just digging the hole further because every time you don't get the results then you're trying to do more stuff and then you feel more resentful that you do the stuff and are hating it and are miserable and then you still feel bad and don't get the results. So that is exactly how it becomes a spiral. And from that, we have to understand what we're dealing with in that way and really what has happened here so that we can backtrack out of it. So often what has happened to get us here is that many of us have had negative experiences with our body that prime that pump, right? You didn't just get to having those thoughts, or your client didn't get to having those thoughts just out of the blue. They probably had things happen to them that reinforced. They tried stuff, they didn't like it, and they didn't get the results, right? And you do that long enough, your brain starts noticing a pattern, and then it makes interpretations that become beliefs. So generally speaking, what has happened along the way, and this can be in healthcare, and it is often set up much earlier in life with parents and authority figures, school, sports, all sorts of stuff, is that we lose authority and self-trust, right? If your experience of the world is then invalidated by somebody else or you, then you're always having to be the part of you that has the experience, and also be the part of you that judges and begins to gaslight the experience. Now you are inherently split, and that's why when we talk about fragmentation, that is how fragmentation happens. And then those two parts of you can become at odds with each other. One says give up, and the other says no, do the thing, invest in that program, maybe this will work. And now you're going around in circles. I don't know what to do, right? And so oftentimes what has happened is that because other people have invalidated our experience, then we also begin to take that on, and often we will invalidate our experience. So it is very, very common in health for people to have the experience that, oh, my labs are normal, I'm fine, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And because of that, they really start to get into the place where it's like, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm the weird one. Maybe there's just something inherently broken about me. And then those two things begin to play off each other, because often then we allow ourselves to be in situations where people mistreat us. And then because we have given over our authority and lost the self-trust that says, hey, no, what you just said isn't actually me. That's not right. That doesn't feel good. That doesn't align with it. And I'm going to disagree with you on that one. Then we really start to wonder more and more, there's probably something wrong with us, and therefore, what does that mean? And we start placing ourselves in compromising positions, and or not taking ourselves out of situations and scenarios, people and environments that are damaging to us. And that's the spiral of suffering, right? And you can hear that someone that started with a health spiral of suffering is then potentially living in relationship dynamics that are similar to this. And that's why I said one avenue into the spiral of suffering will often impact multiple parts of life. And man, did I get into that one, right? The lack of authority that I felt to really say, hey, I'm standing in my power and I'm going to decide what works for me. It doesn't matter if that person says red meat's bad for endo, or FODMAP, you can't heal SIBO with FODMAPs. What is my actual experience? Do I feel better with this? What is going on here? What are the other viewpoints here? Who do I respect as an expert, and what is their viewpoint that I know I'm more aligned with, and what do they have to say, and how do I integrate that into the greater picture of what I know works and doesn't work for me, right? This is a very, very different way of thinking than, oh gosh, here's a laundry list of different things that people have said. They are all different. There's a bunch of discrepancies, and somehow I have to feel like I'm going to do them, but not do them because they contradict each other, right? We get into these really goofy situations where there's kind of a no-win, right? Because if one says, eat low carb for hormones, and someone else says going low carb will damage your hormones, there is no way you can do both. At some point, you will feel guilty about one or the other, and you can bounce between them for years or lifetime and still not really come to the determination, right? It's only when we stop and get out of the spiral that we then get the allowance to even say, hey, what is happening here? And so often it's the losing of the authority and the autonomy, and it becomes superseded by meeting expectations, right? If I could prove to the practitioner or to the doctor or even to my coaching client that I am worthy and then I am putting enough work, then I can prove that, yes, I deserve to heal. I deserve to feel good. But that is not the actual state of healing. There's no one else you have to prove anything to. And in fact, we're all so different that no one person can predict everything that is going to work for you, no matter how great of a provider they are. Or if you are a provider, there's no way you can do that for someone, right? If you can't do it for yourself, you can't predict all of it. So we have to try it on, and we actually have to say, I did the low carb thing. That didn't work. I'm actually just gonna go do the eating the carb thing and go see how that works, because I am my own authority to decide that. And I have already vetted that experience. It didn't go well to do low carb at that point. Let me get another data point by doing something differently. How do I break out of this so that I can come to a new and greater perspective of the bigger picture? We get very tunnel visioned when we are in the spiral of suffering, because usually then we just double down on more of what we're doing, or we just say, if I could do it more perfect, then it will work out for me. But that's not how that works. It's actually the expansion of resources. It's lifting our head up, elevating our perspective, looking at things from a more holistic picture and saying, here is a resource avenue that I have not tried before. This is a new way of doing things, and I'm going to be courageous enough to actually just try it on and see what happens, and be responsible for taking on the consequences, right? And those consequences could be amazing, and you get to take responsibility for those, or they could be not so amazing, and we get to take responsibility for that too. The difference though in that thing, right? Where are we actually getting to, is this is why people want empowerment. It's actually much harder to do than most people think. So when they get there, they're like, shoot, I have to take responsibility for all this? Dang, I didn't want that. It's so much easier for someone to just tell me, and then I can blame them when it doesn't work out. But empowerment is when you can get to the place where that sentence of, I do all this stuff and I'm so miserable and still don't get results, from a place of empowerment where you're making your own calls, that sentence doesn't even make sense anymore. You can't even get to that sentence, because what all stuff that you're miserable and resentful about are you still doing then, and why, right? And then you're still not getting results. Well, then why would you be doing that? That line of thinking, you see, you have to elevate to a greater perspective to even see that that is problematic. And that is where really standing in the experience of, and a lot of times this means having people role model it for you. But what does it look like to, through intentional and small steps, begin to make decisions for yourself, or helping your client make decisions for yourself, right? And this looks like, hey, if you're a coach, right, or if I'm coaching somebody, I'm always saying, what is a safe environment for someone to practice thinking like this, right? If I know that there are 3 T's that would be great for somebody that could fit their picture, right? And I could make the call, or I could say, hey, these 3 are both fitting for you. Now, from what you feel, from what you know, from what the taste that you like, the things that you have read, which one would you like to start with, right? Those are the kind of things that as coaches and as leaders, we are functioning as thought leaders for people. We are helping them become more empowered, because you getting empowerment and then making people dependent on you as a coach is not it. That's not empowerment, right? Empowered people empower others. And therefore, that's what happens when we empower ourselves. When we teach, when we coach, when we lead, when we parent, when we partner, we come from a place of, I'm going to help you be the greatest that you can be, the greatest perspective, the greatest evolution, the greatest growth that you can have. And of course, that always includes empowerment, authority, self-trust, and the capacity to decide who someone wants to be and how they're going to get there. And this becomes so crucial and so motivating, because as we go through it ourselves and we begin to step through these little things, how do I want to drive to work? Do I really want to wear those clothes? Why do I keep the silverware in this drawer? Do I like this over here? We're not talking about should you write the book, should you get divorced, should you marry the guy. We're talking about small, bite-sized ways of saying this situation is safe for me to practice standing my own authority, because it makes sense to be logical about this in some capacity, to say, hey, if this is an area where I can't really make a wrong choice, then that is comforting to me and allows me to practice in a way that my brain, my central nervous system, feels safe to do that. I have the reassurance that my conscious mind has already reached the conclusion, hey, this is all cool. I'm just picking the best one for right now. I'm just picking the one I like the most. That is the kind of stuff that is the most empowering to, I actually didn't mean to reuse that word, is I suppose the most fun and the most safe and the most cultivating of evidence for the central nervous system that you are safe and supported to stepwise through decision-making capacity like that. And then with that evidence, this is where there are plenty of options and resources for continuing to build those neural pathways and really hardwire that identity of being the inner authority for yourself, for really trusting yourself, for knowing that you are making the best decisions that you can at the time, given what you know and with the information that you have. This is really what it looks like. Right? So I am so excited to hear about how this goes. I would love to hear from you. Same thing. Shoot us an email. That's support@zestyginger.com. Now, if this all sounds very intriguing, you're like, I want more of this, right? What does this actually look like to crawl out of the health spiral of suffering and help lead other people in doing so? We are doing connection calls. So you've probably noticed, if you've been around for a while, that Megan and I will, as we begin to focus on new areas and teach new things, we will generally open up spots to connect with you all that are actively working on this, investing in yourselves, starting businesses, starting podcasts, right? Those of you who are taking action on all this stuff, we want to talk to you because we're always tailoring our stuff to fit what you all are dealing with. So we have a lot that is in the works, and we would love to connect with you. So if you are jiving with this level of conversation, and there's going to be more coming, then please shoot us an email and just put podcast either in the subject or in the body of the email. Just say, I came from the podcast and interested in a connection call, and then our team will get you. So you'll be chatting with me. So come chat with me, and I basically we're just going to be connecting. I want to ask questions, and then we always do support. Right? What are you stuck with? What's going on? Next steps? What's up? It's all fairly open-ended, but we love connecting with you all, so excited to do that. Alrighty, that's it for this episode. Go check out Fullscript, zestyginger.com/Fullscript, and then to hop on the phone with me, just shoot an email, zestyginger.com, or support@zestyginger, rather, and just put podcast somewhere in it so we know where you're coming from and where to set you up with. All right, I'm sending you lots of love. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.